Welcome, folks. Shavua Tov, Ketuvach. Good new week. A wonderful week ahead as we share together, learn together, and of course, grow together. Everybody knows that Jews are into education. Education is very fundamental. Why is it so important? How do we view education? How do we view education, in particular, children? Of course, it's something to get them ready for when they become adults. So you can get them ready for becoming adults by teaching them an occupation, and you can get them ready to become adults that they can be mentally, emotionally healthy as adults, because in their youth they were. And then, of course, spiritually and Jewishly, that they are healthy and that they, continue. And the way we see this, of course, naturally, is that there is a continuation of the individual, a legacy, that whatever we are is continued in our children. That's, of course, makes it crucially important that, of course, the children are Jewish. If you want a Jewish legacy, if you want that to continue, then it makes it, of course, extremely important. What's the attitude about it? Is it, fulfilling obligation? Is it about the continuation of me? And how do we look at it? So, before we go there, let's look into something of this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion, a double portion again, Achrei Kedoshim. And it speaks about something that we're currently involved in, and that is Sfiras HaOmer, counting of the Omer, from the second day of Pesach until Shavuos. We count each day the Omer. Today is the 17th day of the Omer, which is Tiferes Shebitiferes, the day that the Rebbe Marash, Reb Shmuel, the fourth Rebbe, born on this day, and awesome, special day. So how do we understand this mitzvah of the counting of the Omer? So let's share over here the page. There we go. So in this week's parsha, it says, one moment, please. Okay, beautiful. It says in this week's parsha, and you shall count for yourselves from the morrow of the rest day, from the day you bring the Omer As a wave offering 7 weeks, they shall be complete. You shall count until the day after the 7th week, namely the 50th day, on which you shall bring a new meal offering to God. So what is that? That's the verse in the Torah. How do we understand the halachic definition of this particular mitzvah? So for that, we need the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch. So the Alter Rebbe writes, and he says it is a biblical mitzvah for every Jew to count on a daily basis for 7 weeks, starting from when the Omer sacrifice is offered. The sages interpreted the words count for yourselves. It might be thought that it's a Jewish court who conducts this count. In the same way, the Jewish court counts the 7-year cycles and sanctifies the 50th year as a Jubilee year. But count for yourself teaches us that every person must do the count. The congregation, the leaders are unable to count on behalf of the public. So each one is obliged to do the count. Now, if you missed in the count, so you can't make a blessing anymore. If you missed one day, if you missed it by night, then by day, if you said it, then you can continue by night, again, with a blessing. But if you missed a full 24-hour period without counting, so you can't make the blessing anymore, you can hear the blessing from someone else, answer Amen, and continue the count. Now, so that's the simple idea that we need to count. It is the days from the second day of Pesach until Shavuos. Shavuos is the 50th day. We count the 49 days in between. And the Medrash gives us a deeper understanding of the meaning behind this count. Text number 3. Why do we count the days between Pesach and Shavuos more so than any other festival? This can be compared to a prince who was out riding and found a man who had been cast into a pit. The prince told him, I will pull you out of this pit, and then after some time, I will give you my daughter as a wife. The man grew tremendously happy and said to himself, not only will he take me out of this pit, but he also wants to give me his daughter. And the prince did just that. He took the fellow out of the pit, dressed him in fine clothes, and gave him gold and silver. When the man saw the prince was true to his word, he began to count how long it would be until the prince would fulfill the pledge to give him his daughter. The Jews in Egypt were as if in a pit, right? And then he took us out of that pit, and he promised us God's daughter. Who's that? The Torah. And he fulfilled the promise. He took us out of Egypt. Now that he took us out of Egypt, so now we counted the days until the promise would be then completely fulfilled, that he would give us his daughter, God's daughter, metaphorically the Torah, that he gave us the Torah, right? So we count down towards that. So according to this, we need to understand. So Sfiras HaOmer, the counting, is merely a preparatory stage that brings us down to the final goal. What's the final goal? That we receive the Torah from God at Har Sinai. If that's the case, it's only a preparation. It's only a means to that end. Why are we making a blessing to give such important focus to this when really it's not about this? It's about where we're going with this, to Mount Sinai. Let me give you an example. Men, don't forget your anniversary. Not for your sake, but for your wife's sake. She won't appreciate it. Every year, you got to remember the anniversary, right? And you got to celebrate it. But tell me, do you celebrate the countdown to the anniversary? And maybe before you got married, so you made a countdown to the wedding day. Got it. But after you're married a year, 5 years, 20 years, whatever it is, are you also celebrating the countdown to the wedding anniversary? Obviously not. So we understand that the Jewish people, they made a countdown to Mount Sinai once they got out of Egypt. Good, fine. But Why are we remembering that now? If the mitzvah is about that countdown, we don't remember the countdown to the wedding anniversary, that would be too many gifts for the guy to give to his wife, by the way, each day. But the anniversary itself, so the countdown is merely to bring you to that very day. If that's the case, then, if this is what the Sfiras HaOmer is, that countdown, then why are we making a blessing? When we make a blessing, we know that we're giving a focus, an emphasis, an importance to this, suggesting that it is, in fact, not about just reaching somewhere. But how do we understand that? In fact, when it comes to this mitzvah, as we know, mitzvahs that are of importance, we make a shechianu. But when it comes to this mitzvah, we don't make a shechianu. We don't say shechianu and thank God that He brought us to this time, because ultimately it's about getting us to where we need to go. Shechianu is about thanking God for this moment. This moment in time is what we thank for. So a holiday, we would say a shechianu, thanking God, shechianu, that you have brought us and has sustained us for this moment, that we could celebrate this holiday in this moment. But the holiday, we don't celebrate it for another means, to another end. We celebrate the holiday as an end in itself. As a matter of fact, that's why, as an example, this year, Shavuos is going to be Friday, Saturday. It's a 2 days. So on Friday, you have to make an Erev Tavshilin so you can cook on Friday, on Yom Tov, for the next day, for Shabbos. It's also Yom Tov, but it's Shabbos and you can't cook on Shabbos. On Yom Tov, you can cook from an existing flame. So we have to make a special Eruv that we've started already the preparations beforehand. Why? Because each day is an end in itself. It's a holy day, and therefore you don't use that day as a preparation for the next day. But since we need to be able to prepare for Shabbos properly and for the holidays, so therefore for Shabbos, so therefore we have this law, the Erev Tavshilin, that allows us and gives us that opportunity, because we started the preparation beforehand. We can continue it on Friday, even though it's a holiday. But the point being that we say a shechianu for the day that it is an end in itself, a celebration for itself. And that's why when it comes to Sfiras HaOmer, we do not make a shechianu, because the point of the Sfiras HaOmer is about the goal that we're going to come to Matan Torah, to Shavuos, so we're going to receive the Torah at Har Sinai. And then we're going to be celebrating the holiday of Shavuos. So our question then, to return to our question, why are we making a blessing over the Sfiras HaOmer, when in fact it seems to be a preparation for something rather than an end in itself? But just to bring that point out further, when you make a blessing even over food, for example, right? It's not a means to an end. You're having pleasure from food, you make the blessing over the food. You make the blessing now over the food. You don't make it because of something later. You make the blessing right now because you're having the pleasure now. So you're thanking Hashem now. That's the blessing. But if the content of the idea of Sfiras HaOmer is the count towards something, then it's not about the now. That's the question. So The simple answer is, it is true that Sfiras HaOmer is about the count to reach to a goal, but yet in a preparation of Sfiras HaOmer in particular, but it is not merely a means to an end, it also serves as an end in itself. It has both qualities. And that the preparation, therefore, is the means to an end, but the preparation is the end in itself at the same time. What does that mean? How do we understand that? So let's frame it. We're going to leave that discussion for a moment. Let's frame this with the mitzvah of chinuch. Spoke at the beginning of the class about education. Jews are into education, a secular education, so you can have a material life, a moral education, so you could be a person of integrity when you grow up, and of course a Jewish education, which would include a moral education, of course, and a Jewish education, so you could live a proper Jewish life when you grow up. The mitzvah is called chinuch. You know, there's two things that are missing in our current education system in the world, that is. You know what that is? Education and system. That's what's missing in the educational system. So the Jewish way of chinuch, which is an interesting word. We translate it as education, but whereas secular education would be about receiving the teachings, the information that will empower you, that you can use it in the end to get ahead in life, simply put. Chinuch is not about a pedagogy merely of instruction, but it actually includes practice. In other words, parents are obligated that when their child becomes 3 years old, for example, right, that they now train that child. You train them to make blessings. You train them by wearing tzitzis, a yarmulke, and the like. So it's a training that what you're doing in that moment, right? And of course, that training will allow them as a means to an end, that when they do mature, that, you know, a yarmulke, tzitzis, a blessing, and all those mitzvahs won't be foreign to them, right? Won't be foreign to them. Now, you might want to compare it to like an athlete who's training, right? They train in order when they come to the big leagues, when they come to the competition, where it really counts, that they will then be able to make their mark in the athletics that they engage in, right? So the Talmud speaks, it might make it that way, but we'll see, there's a distinction. The Talmud speaks about this and explains the following. The sages taught a minor who knows how to wave a lulav is obligated in the mitzvah of lulav. One who knows how to wrap himself in a garment is obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis. If he knows to preserve the sanctity of tefillin in the state of cleanliness, his father buys him tefillin. If he knows how to speak, his father immediately teaches him Torah and Shema. What part of the Torah is taught to such a child? Rav Hamnuna said, the verses Moshe commanded us Torah and inheritance of the congregation of Yaakov. That's from Deuteronomy and Dvarim. And the part of the Shema is taught to such a child, the first verse of the Shema. Now, of course, whose obligation is this? The parent's obligation, right? Father in particular, but the parents collectively. It's not the child's obligation to, at 3 years old, to put on the yarmulke, to wear tzitzis, to make a blessing. It's the father's and mother's obligation to train, chinuch, to train the child, right? However, if we look a little more carefully, we see that there's some kind of nuance in the teachings. The Rambam writes, in Mishnah Torah, right, what we concluded yesterday, today we began anew the Mishnah Torah, right, for the new cycle. So the Rambam writes, one is obligated to hire a teacher for one's son, while one is not required to undertake any expense to teach a colleague's son. So your own son, you're obligated. Your colleague's son, you're not required. A person who was not instructed by his father is obligated to arrange for his own instruction when he can understand, as the verse states, and you shall study them and take heed to perform them. The Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, grandson of the Alter Rebbe. So he says, based on this idea over here, that inasmuch as the father is scripturally obligated to teach his son Torah, it may be suggested that the scriptural obligation lies on the minor as well. Ooh. So we just got finished saying a child is not obligated. They're a minor. Why is there no obligation for a minor? So we've learned in Rambam for many things about a minor. We've learned not just about a minor, but someone who didn't have the mental capacity are also not obligated in mitzvahs. And that is the reason for the minor. They don't have the mental capacity, and therefore the Torah, God through his Torah, does not obligate the child to fulfill the mitzvah. The obligation falls upon the parents, the father in particular again, right? But here the Alter Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek is suggesting that there's a scriptural obligation to teach the son Torah, that it even falls upon the minor. Now, just to add more to this and to see that this idea is reflected further, in other words, that there is some sort of obligation in the minor, let us see Maimonides further, the laws of blessings. So Rambam writes, when two people eat together, each person should recite grace after the meals by himself, right? You ate bread. Each person has an obligation, personal obligation, to thank God. You ate, you satiated, now you got to bless. Birchas Hamazon, benching, grace after meals. Each one individually, because everybody has their own obligation. If one knows how to recite grace and the other does not, so two people, one knows, one doesn't. The one who knows should recite grace out loud. The other person should recite Amen after each blessing, and that way he fulfills it. Because we can help fulfill for another person an obligation. Why? Because I have an obligation, and someone else who is not capable of fulfilling that mitzvah because they don't know how to do the grace after meals. Right? I mean, today you can do it in English, read it. But let's say a person doesn't even know how to read English. They don't know how to read. So they can't fulfill the obligation. Today you don't find too many people like that, but back in the day, boy, there were. So you say the blessing, they answer Amen, they fulfill the mitzvah. Now here, the following. In this manner, one who does not know how to pray fulfills his obligation, and a son may recite grace for his father. Now, what kind of son are we talking about here? We're talking about a son who's a minor. Because if he's not a minor, then of course he can. Anybody can. If another person can help you fulfill the mitzvah, then your own son for sure could do it if he's an adult. So what does it mean, a son here? It means a son who is a minor. He can recite the grace after meals and you fulfill the mitzvah. So the obvious question is, if the child is not obligated, if they're not obligated, so therefore they don't have the mitzvah. They don't have the mitzvah, then I can't help you with your mitzvah because you have the obligation and the child doesn't. So the child doesn't have the obligation, therefore they cannot help the person who does have the obligation. But here we see that the child can help. The child can say, if it's the son of the father, for example, in this example he gives over here, he can. How do we make sense of this? As the Rabbi asks in this week's Sicha, it's puzzling. How can we suggest that an obligation rests on a minor, even by rabbinic standards, if the minor lacks maturity, doesn't have the mind, doesn't have the awareness, doesn't have the mental capacity? If they don't have the mental capacity for their own obligation, so they can't help a person who has the mental capacity to fulfill the mitzvah. How does this make sense? So what's the answer? The answer is, well, on some level, in some manner, the child does have an obligation. What do you mean? You just got finished saying they don't have the intellectual capacity. That's what obligates. So what's obligating them here? So there's obligations that come to us personally because we've been obligated on a direct personal manner. And then there's obligations and responsibilities that come to us in an indirect way. Not because it's been thrown upon us, thrust upon us, but sort of we've been touched by it, and therefore we become obligated. So there's certain mitzvahs, like the mitzvah to study Torah, that when you've been touched by it, even if you're only a child, the obligation rubs off on the individual minor. Let's see how the Rabbi explains in this week's Sicha. Let's understand the role and the part of the minors plays in a mitzvah of education. He's not just an actor without whom the father wouldn't be able to fulfill his father's mitzvah of education. Rather, the minor is a subject of the mitzvah of education, as the mitzvah is for the minor to gain practice. So inasmuch as the father's mitzvah is to educate the child to perform all mitzvahs, a sense of responsibility automatically lands on the minor, and that renders the minor a responsible party. In other words, the father is obligated to educate his child to perform mitzvahs. Though the minor's mitzvah's performance is an outgrowth of the father's obligation, it is an act of the mitzvah performed by the minor that carries out that command. As such, the minor is rendered as a responsible party. As such, a minor is rendered as a responsible party, so much so that the minor is able to discharge an adult's obligation in certain situations, like in the situation of the benching, because the child has through the father's or the parents' responsibility to educate them, train them in the benching. So they're sort of touched by it, by that responsibility. They now become the party that's engaged in it, and therefore it's rubbed off on them a certain responsibility, and hence they can in turn help to fulfill the obligation of the father. So the son can lead the benching, and the father's not capable of it, and help him fulfill his mitzvah. Let's give it a metaphor for this. Right? You're making a stage production, right? You're going on stage. What's it called there? Bollywood? No. Right? You're going on stage, and you have many different actors, and you have costumes, you have the props, you have the music, you have everything that's necessary. And in one of the scenes, you have a child that needs to participate in that scene. Right? A child, a 6-year-old. Now, how much responsibility can you place upon a 6-year-old? Not the same as an adult at all. Right? As a matter of fact, can't even sign a contract with them because it wouldn't be legally binding. Not in Torah and not in the secular world. Right? Why? Because they don't have the mental capacity to understand the obligations and the contractual agreement. But that being said, the fact that the child is now might be in only one scene, but that scene is integral to the entire plot of the play, right? There's something real about that child and their participation. They're a real party of the production, even though they don't really fully understand, they don't fully appreciate. The child's only 6. Can't even write sign a contract with them. You have to do it with their parents. But yet, they become integrally a part of their scene, that scene being an integral part of the play, and sort of rubs off on them a certain sense of responsibility. Directly? No, kind of indirectly, because they're part of something. They've been touched by this production, and hence, sort of by, I don't know if you want to call it osmosis, whatever term you want to use, they become responsible to some degree, on some level. Is that clear? Yeah, we're good? Okay. Wonderful. David, don't forget Rambam here. Okay. So what comes out of our discussion is an important idea about how Judaism views educating young children. It's not just something we do to prepare them in order that they need to know, what to do when they become mature enough. And it's not just about training, and making the list of all the things that they need to be trained and check off the things, right? Make sure that, okay, I did the training well. I'm a good parent. Done everything. Rather, it's something inherently important that makes them a party to the obligation already as children. In other words, it's not about training them for what they will eventually become, mature adults, and have to go out in the world. You could say that about a secular education, right? In the end, it's about the paper that you get that will allow you now, oh, I could practice as a lawyer. I could practice as an accountant, right? Or if you want to get really Yiddish Nachas, practice as a doctor, right? That's all what it is. Because that's merely a means to an end. Likewise, often we look at, as how the evolutionary process, why do we mate? Is because we want to have a continuation of us, right? We don't want it to be finished when we're finished, when we're gone. It's not. We left something behind. Now we continue. We're behind, and our progeny continues. And how beautiful that is. Absolutely, it's beautiful. As my mother just made note, says, as you know, wasn't raised this way. And says, the world's crazy out there. Boy, did you make the right decision and what you did, and look at your kids and how wonderful that they're following the path that you set for them. And they're all, got married, having families, like they're normal. And the world out there is crazy now. It's not normal anymore. Baruch Hashem, thank God, absolutely. But there's something we have to be careful there, because what that means is that the objective is about me and my continuation. So therefore, I want to, of course, educate my child to make sure that they continue what I've started, right? It's like someone who has a business and they want to make sure that their business carries on after them. So they want their kids to have it. So they train them in it, so that it should carry on. But when you speak about a legacy, the legacy is about you. When you speak about education, often it can be about you. So for example, right, when you're in the restaurant and your child is making a tantrum, so what is your initial thought? I got to get this child to quiet down. Why? It's because it doesn't look good for me, right? The people in the kosher restaurant that I'm at who know me are going to have a bad opinion about me as a parent. That's instinctual feeling and sentiment that will arise when your child's making a tantrum in the kosher restaurant, or anywhere for that matter, right? So the first thing is, I got to educate that child. But am I really educating the child? No. I'm just trying to put them into a place that they shouldn't make me look bad. That's on the negative side. But even on the positive side, right, one of the things that we say, and the greatest thing is that we should have nachas, pride and joy in our children. That too can sometimes be a double-edged sword, meaning that, your child is your pride and joy. That itself, aside from, sometimes you can put the pressure on the child, that's not a healthy pressure. But beyond that, it's not about anybody but you, the pleasure that you have from your child. And God should give us all pleasure from our children, but it's not about them. It's not about me having the pleasure in the child. That's not what chinuch, education, is. Chinuch is training the child for this child's sake. So when you're in the restaurant, the child is acting out, it's actually an opportunity, an educational opportunity to help them, to empower them, to give them what they need, that when they'll be in a situation where they want to maybe freak out, right, as an adult, that they will be able to control themselves, to learn how to regulate themselves. So, when it's about you, you'll grind your teeth and if you don't be quiet, you're not gonna get dessert here, or we're gonna go home right now. Right? It's not about the child at that moment. It's about the parent. But if you use it as about the child, and you use it as an opportunity to help the child so that they can be trained, for their sake, be trained. Is that just a means to an end?
Oh, now we have to listen to this? I got to listen to this all day.
Is that just a means to an end? That they will be, as an adult, okay? No. Obviously, it's an end in itself. That moment, that educational moment, where it was all about them and helping them in that moment dealing with their inner turmoil, right? And I'm not giving the method here of what that means. That's because that's beyond the parameter here. But the concept of that it's about them and therefore helping them in that moment. So it's education, training is not about training what they will be. It's about what they are right now, or what you are. Even if they don't become it now, the seed that you're planting now is also an end in itself and not just a means to what that seed will grow up to be, a beautiful fruit-bearing tree. The only reason it's a beautiful fruit-bearing tree in the end is because in the moment you seeded it properly as an end in itself. And who's the end? Not me as the educator, as the parent, but the child and what they need in that moment for themselves. That's how the child then becomes the responsible party. And what you're really trying to make them is at this moment to be responsible. If it's about how I get nachas from them, or if it's about how I get them to shut up now that they don't make a tantrum, right? So I'm not teaching them anything. I'm just getting them to shut up, or I'm not helping them in their empowering them. But if it's about empowering them, that means there is a sense of responsibility that you put upon them. So for example, when you're in the restaurant and you tell your child, come, let me hold you. We're in the restaurant and you have an opportunity now. And people look at you and they see a child with a yarmulke, and you have an opportunity that you could sanctify Hashem's name. You can make a Kiddush Hashem. They will look at you and they say, look at that. So beautiful. Now, I'm just giving that as an example. I'm not saying that that's what should be said. It depends on the child. If the child is ready to hear that and they are aware of that concept prior to that moment, you don't bring that concept then to them. So something that they need to have lived with or been taught and trained beforehand. So then in the moment of a tantrum, that it could be something, right? Again, whatever it is, the point being is that in that moment, you're empowering them in a way that you're even giving them a sense of responsibility. So the education is an empowerment that gives them a sense of ownership. They're only a minor. Torah doesn't place it upon them, swear upon them? Absolutely not. They don't have the capacity. But done by a parent or a teacher in the right way, that is that's about them and an empowerment for them. So then they can sense the responsibility and hence a certain element of ownership. It becomes their thing. It becomes their thing, not just yours, which is amazing. A beautiful thing. As the Rabbi explains, this week's Sikha, the only way to ensure the Jewish child assumes their own identity and creates a personal connection with the mitzvah is as if they are properly educated about them. This is aligned with our discussion here, namely the mitzvahs of education renders a minor a responsible party because it's about them, it's about empowerment of them, right? That they're empowered, that they take ownership. Again, how much ownership? Not in a way that they're square responsible, because they're not. They don't have the capacity for that. But that's what you want to train them in that manner. That's education. Previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, says the story of when he was 8 years old. And it was Erev Pesach, preparing for Pesach. Passover holiday coming. And everybody in that household had obligations. And one of his obligations was that he had to unscrew the wine, get the wine ready from the corks, and it was sealed, and have it prepared. And that day he had gotten a new suit and new shoes, and those shoes were really shiny and beautiful, and he appreciated it very much so. And his father recognized that in the duties that he had, he was more concerned about the shiny shoes than he was about the duties that he had to fulfill. And so his father says to him, when the king makes a celebration, who comes to celebrate with the king? Who comes? The people that are close to the king. King's servants, the inner circle, the family, they come to celebrate. You imagine a king makes a celebration and who comes sit at the table are the dogs? Wouldn't be proper. Mixing up things. Now, this was an 8-year-old, not like, I don't even know if we had the maturity at his age today. I don't know. He got the message. Stop worrying about your shine. Don't mix up priorities. Right? It's not about the shine on the shoes. It's about the mitzvah at hand. Later on, when he recounted the story as a Rebbe and a Sikha, says, that's education. He didn't scold him. He gave him a metaphor that he could appreciate and understand, even though only 8 years old, and that he got the message very discreetly, and it resonated. And he realized, make what's the priority. Now, was that education a training merely to he will become the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the 6th Rebbe? For sure, no question. His father was training him to become the adult that he would become, responsible adult, and ultimately the Rebbe of Klal Yisrael. But it wasn't just a means to an end. It was an end in itself. It was an empowerment in the moment, the value in the moment, period. This, we can then appreciate how in our generation, the Rebbe did this more than in any other previous generation, the empowerment of the children. Never of the other Rebbeim, Rebbes, to my knowledge at least, did they make a rally just for children to emphasize the importance and the value of the children. Speaking to the children and empowering them. Not when you grow up, there's a world out there, you're going to be able to conquer that world, you're going to be, and we're now giving you all the tools that later on. No. Now, to the degree that he made an organization called Sivas Hashem, God's army. And who could be in God's army? Only if you're under bar and bas mitzvah. Under 13 for the boys, under 12 for the girls, you could be in this army. Afterwards, no longer in that army. The whole idea of army, we'll get into that. The point is giving them inherent value, not just a means to some end, but inherent value as a child. And in the mitzvahs that you do, and the Torah that you study. This is the Rebbe's generation. And uniquely in our generation more than ever before, this concept. With this, then we can understand our original question, why we celebrate Sfira by giving it so much attention. Is it not a stepping stone to Matan Torah? It's true. Absolutely it is. At the same time, the preparation for Matan Torah is an end in itself. If we today, in our count, we grow, we plant a seed, and that seed may not sprout until Matan Torah completely, but it planted today something, right? In the new Sfira, or in today's Sfira, Tiferes Sheb'Tiferes, that we've planted something today, even though it's going to only bring forth in the future. But right now, there's an empowerment. Right now, there's a refinement. Right now, there's an end in itself in the count. And therefore, it counts, that count, as an end in itself, that we make a bracha over it. It's not merely a stepping stone, but it has great importance and a focus, so much so that we make a bracha every single day, because every single day we can grow and do grow and do the mitzvah in a manner that will in the moment bring a divine connection. And that's the story, folks. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Thank you, Tim, and everyone. Yeah, beautiful teachings from the Rebbe. Okay, from here we go to the Rambam. Everybody got the Zoom, so you can zoom in, right? Everybody got it, right? Okay. All right, folks. We'll. God bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye.